Hey everybody, welcome to the April 7th MakerDAO community call. My name is David Utrobin. I work at the Maker Foundation and I do community development, which is a super kind of broad, important topic for the MakerDAO project because, obviously it's a protocol that's meant to be run by the community. And so I get the pleasure of facilitating these calls every week. And if you're new to the call, we do a couple of things. So we usually go through the week at MakerDAO and sometimes the 2 weeks at MakerDAO if there is especially a lot of stuff going on. But today we're just going to do the week. And we also like to have interesting guests on and do like demos, walkthroughs, just educational stuff that's valuable to you guys, the community and gals. So today we do have a special guest, one of our very own, Christopher Mooney, who actually came on board to the Maker Foundation also through the community, just like a real Maker OG, and he is one of the sweetest guys at the foundation. But everybody at the foundation's sweet, so he's going to be walking us through an executive vote audit. And actually, I'm just going to give over the mic to him and let him talk a bit more about it, because I know him and a few others at the foundation have been working really hard and mindfully about making it a lot more accessible to people that are non-technical. So, Chris, if you are on the call, I saw that you just rejoined, but
oh man, the perils.
The perils, right?
Yeah, I'm deeply worried that the normies and their Netflix are going to knock me offline during this.
Oh, no.
But we'll see.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. And so if you guys want the agenda in general, here it is in the chat, so you guys can follow along. But for the first part of the call, it's going to be all Chris, and we're going to walk through an executive vote audit. So yeah, man, it's the mic's all yours.
All right, I'm going to leave my video off just in an effort to maximize not failing here. Let's see. And can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So I made this blog post a little while back that just tried to walk in general some people through. Well, I guess it wasn't a blog post, forums post, trying to walk the community through how one would audit a spell. And so I'm just going to sort of walk through this process today and give everyone a hands-on idea of what it feels like to actually go through this process. Obviously, the importance of this is that you don't want to just blindly vote on something, promote it, and have it become a hat. If that thing has malicious code in it or a bug, that would be really bad. There's lots of auditing that the engineers at the foundation do on these things, but you also shouldn't trust the foundation, right? You should trust your own eyes. So,
hey Chris.
So this is an effort to show you how to do that. Yep.
Really quickly. So for the people that are like watching the call that might not be familiar with the terms like spell, hat, do you want to give maybe like a super brief explanation of like how voting works?
Yes. Yeah. So in normal parlance, I guess you'd say a spell is, I guess, a way of defining the types of configuration changes that governance is going to make to the protocol.
So it's like a proposal, right?
The spell contains, yeah, I mean, there's a proposal that we all vote on, and as an executive, that has a bunch of actual code changes that change configuration parameters in the protocol on mainnet.
Right.
And so I know I'm maybe just digging myself a deeper hole with the jargon, but a spell is basically just the way that we change, let's say, the stability fee or the debt ceiling or some other aspect, or even possibly include a new contract into the Maker protocol. So it's obviously critically important that those be accurate. that they capture the will of governance, and that they be, bug free and don't have any malicious code. Otherwise, complete protocol failure could ensue. So, so basically, what happens is when you get a proposal, we toss that thing into something called the chief, and we all vote on it there. And when it garners enough votes, it can be lifted to the hat. So the chieftain's hat is what we call it. And that position in the chief has a special privilege in order to affect changes in the Maker protocol. So I hope that gives a general idea of how this works. But
I think so.
So yeah, and everyone feel free to interrupt me if there's something you have questions about as we go along. So I'm going to go right down the list so that if someone were to pull this list up again, or we publish this on the blog, that there's a real, at least a video to sort of go along and help handhold you through the process. So first, we need to find the link to the spell on Etherscan from the voting portal. So here's the voting portal that you're familiar with, at least circa Q2 2020. And you have two proposals usually in our voting portal. One is typically the thing that currently has the hat that we were just talking about, which means this is the sort of governing proposal. It's the thing that's either guarding or it was the last sort of state of the system. And we have this new proposal that has been put up, and we want to be able to vote on this proposal. But how do we know? This is especially good because it just says adjust multiple risk parameters, adjust multiple risk parameters. So I don't know, these look the same, right? So what's the difference? So if you go to this read more link, you will pull up the actual proposal, which has a couple sort of plain English descriptions of what this executive vote should do. So this thing says it should lower the USDC stability fee from 16% to 12%. It should raise the PSI stability fee from 7.5 to 8. And we should lower the PSI to DAI migration debt ceiling to 0. This is a special one because this is the first step in shutting down single collateral DAI, or at least I would say severing the link between single collateral and multiple collateral DAI. So so this will be a bit novel to look at. But yeah, okay, so I know that's what it says, but the foundation is what put this up, and I'm supposed to trust them. So how do I verify what this is actually going to do? Well, we've got this link to the source code over here. And so we can click that link, and that will bring us to Etherscan. And this interface is confusing, probably harder to figure out. But if you look here, we have a couple things on this contract. So we're looking at the page that Etherscan presents us for the contract. Etherscan is a block explorer, so we can view various aspects of someone's either address or a contract. And contracts are special because they get this nice little contract tab. And so if we can see that there was a transaction here from Maker Deployer that did a contract creation. So that was 4 days and 1 hour ago. So this contract was created 4 days and 1 hour ago. If we click the contract link, we will be brought to this page with read contract, write contract, and code. And so this is the source code that we're going to go through verifying today. Let's see. So so in this step, we've now picked the Etherscan link from the voting portal. We've gone to that address on Etherscan. We've opened the spell by clicking the contract tab. And we can now see the contract code. If you see bytecode, you should cry foul in chat and encourage people not to vote on it, that's because you have no idea what that spell does. So what that would look like is this. See, I'm on a contract, and I've, I can see the transactions. I can see Maker Deployer even deployed this 284 days and 21 hours ago. And Maker Deployer failed to validate this particular contract. So we don't know what this thing does. And we absolutely should not be voting on anything that isn't completely transparent and viewable. So if you show up on this contracts tab and you see just a blob of bytecode like this, you need to mention it in chat and try and encourage people not to vote on this thing, or at least wait until it's been verified. About a month or two back, we pushed a spell, and we're struggling with the verification aspect of it. There was a piece in there that was causing it to be very difficult to verify. And we had this, code blob up, and I think that executive vote garnered about 22,000 MKR in support of it before we finally got it verified. So 22,000 MKR voted for the thing without actually knowing what it did.
So, Chris, can you talk maybe like a little bit more about the verification process? Is it a direct communications line that we have with Etherscan directly, or is it something that has to happen through the blockchain?
Yeah. So what happens is we compile this code and deploy it with a create contract transaction or a contract creation transaction. And that gets deployed out onto the blockchain, but it's just bytecode when it lands there. And we don't, there's no sort of interface to it, which is in our parlance is what you'd call the ABI to understand what functions are available on that contract. And there's no sort of deep inspection beyond that of what those functions actually do. And so what we end up having to do is click on this verify and publish link. And this verify and publish brings us to a couple options. So we do Solidity single file, go down to, let's say, the compiler that we're going to use, pick a license, and then we get brought to this screen. And what the foundation can do, or anyone that constructs a spell like this, or any contract at all, is they can paste the source code of the contract inside this box, and then swear that you're not a robot, and hit verify and publish. And this is sort of where the elegance of the of all of this works out. That source code will get compiled by Etherscan on their servers and compared against the bytecode that landed on chain.
Wow, that's cool.
So then there's no other sort of step that needs to happen there. They know that the source code you provided is with that compiler version at that contract address is indeed the same thing that you've actually deployed. And so once you've done that, you will get this nice little check mark that says contract source code verified, exact match. And
thank you so much. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so that's the first step, right? So if you only see that bytecode, it's a big red flag that you shouldn't be voting for that executive, and that no one really should be voting for that executive unless someone comes along and verifies it.
Quick question. How long does it take for the contract to get verified? Like, let's say MakerDAO needs to do an emergency executive, like as we've done, like even just a couple of weeks ago. What's like typically the timeline? Is it a very quick process, or does it sometimes it's instant? Okay, I see Brian wrote in the chat. Cool.
Yeah, so it's reasonably instant, so long as there aren't other hangups in the verification process. That one that we tried to verify that we were having difficulty with like a month ago. That one, we were just having a heck of a time with it. It took us a while to
yeah, that was actually an issue on Etherscan's side, like their database shut down or something and didn't pick up
that's what it was.
Didn't pick up the transaction, so we had to redeploy.
Nice, thanks. Floor is yours, Chris. I think you
Okay,
might.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I went through a bout of lag there.
Nah, it's cool.
Perilous times. So yeah, that's what it was. We ended up verifying another contract hours later once their verification system was back up. And then Etherscan was smart enough to realize that because we'd verified this other deployed contract, it could pull the verification off of that for the one that we had deployed. So
nice.
Yeah, so now so now we're going to scroll to the bottom. So if you get to this contract tab, you can scroll to the bottom. There's a light level of sort of syntax highlighting, but this, you know, and I think this is enough to probably review a spell. You know, we certainly do all the time, but I've lifted, so I've copied and pasted this spell code into Remix just so that we have like a little bit better syntax highlighting. If anybody knows how to turn this into dark mode too, let me know. So the instructions are to scroll down to the bottom. And the reason we do that is because at the bottom, that's typically where we have our spell. So this entire highlighted block is a contract. So we have a contract DS spell here. And note that this file can contain multiple contracts. So we have contract spell action, contract VAD abstract. So most of these abstracts are just libraries that we use to reference other contracts that we have in the system. And down at the bottom, we will see a constructor, which is the thing that's called when the contract is initialized. Now, for the most part, this constructor should stay the same. And in fact, let's see if that's been true. No, I bet this expiration now has been added. But let's see. So in our document, it says, yes, we're going to do a sig action, bytes action. Yep. So let's see. You have sig action, bytes, address action, a little bit of assembly for the tag. But now we have this thing called an expiration. And so we've added this new ability to expire spells that we've written on behalf of the foundation. So this means that they can't just sit in the chief and then be promoted at any given time. This is useful because all the spells out there, at least that we've constructed in the past, have the ability to eventually garner enough votes and become the active executive. And if those were executed, they could change the state. Like right now, you could change the stability fee in single collateral DAI to 22.5%. Because there's a spell sitting in the chief that would do that for you. So this expiration will help us prevent that from happening. So this executive will only be good for 30 days. We also added this new description, which is kind of nice. We can do this kind of cool thing. We went to the contract. Let's see. We go back to the contract. We can go to read contract. And you can actually see the description here. It says that this is the executive spell on this particular date. So, so the first thing to check after you've looked at the constructor is that you want to look at the schedule and cast. And they're usually about the same, although they probably changed just a little bit because we added that expiration. So here's what the schedule should look like. So we're going to require this ETA in this plot. And so if we look, we have this require for the ETA, this ETA, the ETA assignment in the plot. But we have this new thing, which is the require that's going to prevent the spell from being executed if it's past 30 days. So this is, you know, you don't want to gloss over the constructor because someone could put a malicious action in this constructor. And you don't want to gloss over the schedule. In fact, you don't really want to gloss over anything, but you're getting an idea of, you know, sort of how to read this as you go through. So in the schedule, this is the first thing that's going to be called after that. So if it garners enough MKR, it can be a function called lift can be called on the chief, which is going to lift the proposal to the hat. And the first thing that's going to happen is this schedule is going to be called after it's been lifted. And so that's going to check that now is less than expiration, and it will be, unless it's beyond the 30 days. ETA is 0, which it will be, because ETA started out here. We never assigned anything to it, so it starts out as 0. And we're going to set ETA to now plus the pause delay. So this is the you guys know this as the governance security module. This is the governance security module's delay. And so we're going to say, okay, this thing is scheduled. ETA is now set beyond the delay, and then we're going to plot the action in the pause. So this is our way of sort of throwing this into the spell queue. So there's a sort of delay queue that exists, and we're throwing actions into that delay queue. And so now this thing has to wait ETA amount of time before it's going to be available for execution. And then below here, because single collateral DAI does not have a governance security module that has a delay in front of it, below here we can just make any changes to single collateral DAI or any instant access modules, right? So we have the circuit breaker that we've added recently. So any instant access modules could happen underneath this sort of comment here. For this spell, there's none. So we're not making changes to single collateral DAI. And is that true? Let's go back to we're going to raise the.
So we are making a change.
Yeah. Let's see.
Have we discovered a mistake?
We might have actually discovered a mistake.
Also, make sure that you.
I'm gonna spin off Brian. Brian.
Of...
Yeah, exactly. You should, Brian. Can you make sure that I grab the right thing here? We might not have that stability fee change. Did I grab the right thing? Let's just go through that process again.
Check the spell. Did we make the change to the migration contract?
I saw 327, and over here it's saying it started April 2nd, but I'm not sure if April 2nd is talking about when the contract was deployed or something.
Let's see. So we've got this contract code.
Yeah, I think you're looking at.
This is from 2 weeks ago.
I'm looking at the wrong thing.
You're looking at the wrong one.
See? There we go.
Sweat off your forehead.
Yeah. All right. So that's good though. So let's select that and paste this. Okay. So here we are again. Same thing. Constructor looks the same. Description still exists, except now we have a single collateral DAI change. This is why you audit stuff, right? So we get to raise the stability fee in single collateral DAI from 8% to 7.5, and we're going to use this Psi Mom-like, which is a sort of special contract that has the ability to change things in single collateral DAI, to set the fee to this single collateral DAI 8% fee. And this 8% fee is over here. And why don't we jump right into how do we verify that that's 8%? So in this, we talk about the way that we determine what exactly we need to set the rate to for a per second for the rate accumulator. So this would be a rate of 9.5%. And it produces this output here. All we do is just take this decimal point off, and we toss this entire, we toss this entire thing in for a 9.5% stability fee. So the way to validate the stability fees is we will start out with this. So we've got this 8% fee. That's what we're going to set single collateral DAI to. We're going to run this BC command, right? So this is the same BC command, scale 27, which is a RAD. We're we're going to give it an 8% fee. Can you guys see that terminal over here?
Yes, yeah.
And then if I hit enter on that, we get 1 points of blah, blah, blah. So we can actually start to look like 244041. So 244041. We say we have 1 bunch of zeros, 244041. And since this is actually kind of fun, since we're in an editor here, this is a good reason not to do this in, we can just put these right next to each other and let them visually line up so that we can see indeed that they match. So that's an 8% fee, ticked every second. So we know that this configuration line is going to be doing the correct thing. I'm not going to dig into what the SIMOM looks like in the set fee. These are well-established contracts, but it is worth asking, are we pointed at the right contract, right? So is SIMOM correct? And so SIMOM we see here, and that is 0xF2. And so if we go back to this, there should be a discussion here about, so we're currently on 1.0.4 for the contracts. And if I open this up, this gives us all of the contracts for, see, oh, do we not have the SIMOM in here? We must not. So this one's going to be trickier.
Yeah, you'd have to go to the changelog for whatever the SCD contracts are, right?
Right. So so I feel like maybe we should try and do that. I don't know if that's just on. Let's see if these are here. I know of another way to do it, but I want to see if we can actually. No, this is just going to be for MCD.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wrong link.
Yeah, Brian posted a link to the GitHub for the current side deployment.
So what we can do in this spell is we can actually take the SIMOM and we can paste this down in Etherscan and validate that it is the SIMOM. So this isn't a perfect validation. Someone can fake a contract that's called the SIMOM. Obviously, it's pretty big, but yeah, this looks like it has the right interfaces. And the other aspect is it
has history.
Probably, yeah, it's got a transaction history here. Wow, this is super old, huh? 28 days. Internal transactions. Here we go. Here's your contract creation a mere 841 days ago by an address that actually we don't know if that's owned by the foundation. So yeah, so maybe follow Brian's link to determine that the SIMOM is actually the SIMOM. We can put this into the change log. That can be something that we add. So that gets us through to the end of schedule. And so in theory, I should actually mention these comments are pretty nice too, because this gives a link to the pull that was used for determining this. And if you load it, you can kind of validate pull stability fee.
And that's only for the short term, unless like we take those pulls off of that URL. It's like good in the short term because, like, for example, like if you look at the executive votes, like they only last
for, they're
2
gone.
weeks. Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah, we should probably have those longer.
Or have like an archive place for them. Yeah.
So let's see. So note that in the spell CD changes. So this is sort of discussing the same thing that we just saw. Also, the SIMOM here was the SIMOM that we had seen. And so now the fun part, and we're going to we're going to do this. So we're actually going to talk about what happens after that delay. So now that this schedule is done, what happens is we have to wait the governance delay, which was 24 hours, is now 4 hours, and we get to this cast call. And so when we call cast, we check that it hasn't been cast already. If it hasn't, then we set done to true, and we call the pause proxy or the governance delay. This is actually, it's a slight bit different. So if you look at the code, this will go to a different contract that has permissions. That's the thing that we actually add as permissions in all of the protocol. So what'll happen is it'll exec this action tag sig in ETA, which were some of the definitions up here, and you see the action was defined by this new spell action. Spell action is a contract, and that contract is up here. And so that contract is actually where the meat of the changes for multi-collateral DAI happen. So, so once that is exec'd, it will execute this contract. So a few things to look for. In this contract, because of a quirk of how we code things, all of these need to be constant. If there's ever any variables in here, it could be probably at best a bug, but it could actually even be potentially malicious action. So these have to be constant. I probably won't go into the details of that, but it has to do with the fact that when this execute is called, it's not executed in the context of the spell action. It's executed in the context of the pause proxy that has permissions to make these changes. But the constants are okay. So we might want to validate some of these constants, right? So okay, this is 4/38/2020. MakerDAO executive spell. So here's the VAT. So we can just let's see. So yes, that's the VAT. The jug is there, and the pot. Sorry, I'm not as good as copy and paste as Justin. So there's the pot. So then we look at this 12% rate. And this is just an example of how you'd get it, but let's go ahead and run our 12%. So it's 8, let's make that 12. Just go up here, paste that. Sure enough, that visually lines up. So we've got a 12% rate. And we've got a RAD, which is just one of the sort of largest. It's defined as a WAD times array, but it's one, this is just a definition because RADs are how we store a bunch of things in the protocol. And then to make things easier, we got sick of counting zeros whenever we had to validate these things. So we defined this thing called million, which is just 10 to the 6th power. So in the executive, we have to drip the pot, which is the DSR. So this just makes sure we, in this one transaction, we get the sort of rate accumulators set up right at the right time quantum. And then we have to drip every collateral type that we have. There's one collateral type missing here, which is psi, because we have a psi collateral type, but we don't have to drip that because the collateral is set to have a 1% stability fee. I mean, a 0% stability fee. So there's no reason to drip it. Right now, we technically don't have to drip the pot, but we're leaving it here for good housekeeping. And so your MCD modifications, we assign USDC to the 12% rate. So we already verified that MCD jug was correct, right? So MCD jug was here. And we file USDC-A. Duty is the term for our stability fees. It's the Taiwanese for that stability fee. And we set it to the USDC fee, which was 12% rate. So that all checks out. We do the same thing for psi. Oh, this is a different, okay, so psi line. So line is our debt ceiling. So easy enough, we set psi line to 0, and we're going to set the psi line to that 0. So psi in this case is a proper collateral type like FA, BAT-A, USDC-A, and we're setting it to 0. And anyone who hasn't voted for this executive, unless you are in staunch opposition to it, you should, because we cannot shut down single collateral DAI unless we turn off this bridge. So this makes it so the bridge will no longer work in that direction. I probably shouldn't advocate for whether or not you want to, people should vote how they feel like they should vote. But if your ultimate goal is to shut down single collateral DAI, this is the first and necessary step. We cannot shut it down until this happens. So if you haven't voted, go vote. Then your global debt ceiling is set to 113 million. And so this is just taking the 10 from psi, right, and moving it down to 113 million, right? So we're subtracting the 10 from the 123 down to 113. And line with an uppercase L here is the entire global debt ceiling. So this is the amount so right now it's defined as the sort of the sum of all of the debt ceilings of collateral types. But in theory, those two things can diverge and be different. So, in a hot emergency, we could actually set the global debt ceiling to 0, and it would prevent all collateral types from working as well. So, and that's the end of the spell action. Everything above this is just sort of the libraries for the sort of core system contracts. And that took me longer to go through than I was kind of hoping for. It's about 10 minutes over where I was targeting. I did have another spell here I was kind of planning on talking about, but I feel like I should just figure out what people on the call want to do. This is a Defcon spell. It's basically a break glass in case of emergency spell that we've just recently constructed and deployed in case we see a Black Swan style event again. I can briefly talk about it because this is its unveiling right now if you wanted to hear about it. But
yeah, so Chris, definitely let's talk about the spell. But I also want to ask, after you talk about the spell, can you give us a little bit more detail on what the foundation is planning, or if there's anything else that's really going into making these like more auditable and more accessible, just on a meta general level?
Yeah, why don't I talk about that first?
Go
So we started working a while back internally on something we were calling the spellbook, which is this was before MCD was really, like, we saw how governance was going to interact with MCD. And so we started building these sort of this script that could, on the fly, you would just pass it your parameters and it would construct and, well, I'll use the terminology because it's fun. It would pull the spell out of the spell book, put it in the cauldron, mix the reagents together, which would be the parameters that you passed it. It would compile that entire thing, deploy it to the chain and tuck it into the chief, and archive it. And not only would it deploy the spell, it would deploy a test that went along with it to make sure it did exactly what it was supposed to do. And the problem is that the construction of that spellbook was sort of onesie twosie. Like it was, it would do one thing at a time, like set the debt ceiling for a particular collateral type, but it wouldn't do everything together. And so we're hoping that we can take this spellbook, and instead of having it, let's say, just change the duty for FA, that it would build effectively what you see here, that these sort of chunks would be templated and it would build one giant governance spell. And right now there's a sort of scripting interface to do that, but we may even wrap a web interface around it so that you can kind of just choose what you want your values to be, and it would build this spell for you.
That is really
I
cool.
think the verification process, everything will remain the same, but yeah, it should, it would be really cool if we could hand this off to governance entirely so that the foundation didn't have to build these each week. And so that we're pretty excited about that. So that is definitely on our roadmap and part of the sort of self-sustaining MakerDAO initiative that Rune was talking about. So
nice.
Yeah.
So just a heads up, Chris, before you get started, I do like try to aim to only spend maybe the next like 5 to 8 minutes. I want to leave the last 10 minutes of the call to kind of go over what's been going on in governance for the week for people who haven't been listening to the calls and like, yeah.
So I'll go really fast then. So this is a spell that we've just deployed. It's intended to be a break glass in case of emergency level spell. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Defcon levels, but Defcon 1 would be like nuclear war is either happening or imminent. And it has a couple pre-canned configuration changes from the risk team that we think would help us in the case where we saw an approach to, say, low keeper liquidity or network congestion again. And so the idea here is that this will perform a bunch of actions, and I'm not going to go through the deep auditing of it. It will expire at a certain point. So this spell will only last until I think the 1st of July. And it's already on mainnet now. So that's this spell right here. So it's already out there. We just probably have to write up the sort of definition of it so we could toss it in the vote portal as quickly as we can. So in the schedule function, everything else is pretty boilerplate. In the schedule function, we get down to the first sort of cool thing that we can do, which is this is the way we trigger the liquidation circuit breaker. So we can instantly, as soon as this thing gets the hat and is scheduled, we can trigger the liquidation circuit breaker to turn off liquidations for all of these collateral types. So F, BAT A, and USDC.
And to clarify, the circuit breaker is not subject to the governance delay, right? It's like coded to bypass it?
Correct. Yeah, that's why. Yep, that's exactly it. Yeah, so that's why it's happening in this section, right? So this is the schedule. Everything else we have to wait for the cast. But you can see that we can instantly trigger the circuit breaker as long as governance, promotes this thing out.
Got it. That's super
cool. And then normal cast is called 4 hours later at the current time arc, but this could be whatever the delay is. So currently it's 4 hours. And then this set of changes is going to run. Let's see. So we're going to go into the execute. So we have a 0 and a 50% rate. So we drip all of the stuff again. The first thing we do is set the DSR to 0. It already is right now, but what the heck, we're going to do it again just in case it's something else. We'll set the FA stability fee, BAT A stability fee to 0. This one is interesting. We're going to set this USDC A stability fee to 50%. And the reasoning here is that would enable it to be used by keepers only. No one is going to want to take out DAI against USDC at a 50% rate unless they're a keeper that's like actively cycling what's available to them back into the auction system. So this basically says, okay, USDC is just a facility that's going to be used for or by the keepers. So
it prices out the longer term borrowers in preference for the shorter term emergency needs, right? Yeah.
We increase the USDC debt ceiling from 20 million to 40 million. And then we basically, this is a kind of interesting little trick. We determined what the debt ceilings for each collateral type are, and we then sort of sum those all together to set our global. In fact, this might actually be the norm that we start doing soon. That way we don't have to do the math in our head. We then also changed the flips tau, which is the overall auction expiration time, to 24 hours. So this is not the duration of a bid session. This is how long the overall auction can last. So so there is a sort of 6-hour session. This changes it so that it can be extended to 24 hours. It used to be 3 days until recently. We made them the same. We did the same thing for BAT-A. And then this is a kind of cool thing. We don't want to activate liquidations on the USDC collateral type because we don't want liquidations to happen there. And we're pretty sure that USDC is going to stay the same. So this will then turn on liquidations again for both FA and BAT-A. So that's it. So it trips the circuit breaker, makes a bunch of configuration changes that should make it easier for keepers to recycle their capital and incentivize users to sell their DAI and to print more DAI based on F and BAT. And then we extend the auctions just in case there's network congestion, and then re-enable the circuit breaker. So we flip it back on so that liquidations can happen. And that's it. One spell does all of that. Is there any questions? I'm gonna stop presenting.
And if you guys have any questions for Chris about this whole process, even after the call, feel free to reach out to him. He is wonderfully responsive in the Maker chat.
Yeah.
Right on. Well,
thanks everybody.
Thank you so much for coming on, Chris. I think just watching you talk through the changes and even just highlight the pieces of code in your Explorer, it was just very helpful to me personally, because I don't code, but seeing you do it has helped me have a bit more confidence in what's going on behind the scenes there. So thank you. All right. Barring any questions, which doesn't seem like there are any, I'm gonna share my screen for just the last 10 minutes of the call, and I'm going to try to get through the rest of what I have in the agenda. If I don't get through anything in the agenda, the link is public. You guys can go through it yourselves. You don't necessarily need me to present it. But for the last 10 minutes, I want to especially kind of pay mind to catching people up in what's been going on in governance. So let me present a window so it's a little bit more entertaining than watching me speak directly, so I could also highlight stuff and kind of talk through it. So the TLDR for governance this week, there's a few things. As Chris actually mentioned, so step 1 of SCD shutdown is currently being voted on in the executive, which is the closing of the SAI to DAI migration contract. And then there's also 2 stability fee changes. So this is important because it actually closes the ability for people to convert SAI to DAI 1-for-1, but not the other way around. And this is a big important thing for MKR voters, because after the global settlement or emergency shutdown of single collateral DAI, SAI actually becomes a claim on underlying ETH and no longer functions as a stablecoin. It functions as ETH exposure. So from the perspective of the Maker protocol, if single collateral DAI shuts down and we still have SAI in our system, it introduces this kind of volatility in the quote-unquote balance sheet of the protocol. So all of that is to say, this is a very important vote. Go read about it. There's also a linked forum thread if you want even more details about it. So check it out. Also, very important to mention, Rune presented the self-sustaining MakerDAO initiative on last Thursday's risk and governance call. I highly recommend you guys either read the summary that we produce or actually watch his presentation. It was really well presented, and the gist of it, which I'll get into in a bit, is that it's kind of 3-pronged. the vision for the protocol is to have an entire ecosystem of elected paid contributors, of special domain teams that handle like specific functions, like the risk team, for example, and the Oracle team that were ratified late last year. And then thirdly, vote delegates. So MKR voters being able to actually give their voting power to either public people or people they personally trust to make decisions on their behalf in MKR voting. By the way, so if anybody sees anything in the chat that's worth stopping and mentioning, definitely interrupt me, because I'm gonna kind of go through this. But yeah, so feel free to hop on the mic if there's something that's worth highlighting from the chat. All right, and then the third point from the TLDR is that the governance poll, and this is like slightly concerning, but nevertheless, the governance poll that ran for a week about single collateral DAI shutdown was concluded. And the question was whether the system should be shut down on April 24th, which is in a mere, I think, 17 days. And it concluded yes, with something like 66-33 for versus against, and it's like percent, right? So there was a significant amount of yeses, but also like a significant amount of no's, and I kind of want to get into a little bit about why the no's were there, and yeah, just what you should think about. So it has to do with this first step thing that I talked about of Psi actually still being in existence in the MakerDAO protocol. So 17 days is like a very short period of time. And yeah, that's about it. So there's a bit of like contention around this vote, but it's still concluded yes. So if you're an MKR voter, keep your eyes glued to this, because this is going to be kind of the defining next step of what's going to be going on for the month of April. So yeah. Here's kind of the active votes that are currently happening. I already mentioned, and actually Chris audited this vote. So we're lowering the USDC stability fee from 16 to 12. We're raising the Psi stability fee from 7.5 to 8. And we're lowering the Psi DAI migration debt ceiling to 0. I'm not going to talk much more about this because we've already given it quite a bit of airtime. The usual governance polls are up, barring the DSR spread, because that happens bi-weekly now instead of weekly. Nevertheless, if you're an MKR voter, go vote. This is going to inform the next executive vote that's going to be coming up, which if all is well, it should be going up on Friday the 10th. There are 2 special governance polls that aren't part of kind of this weekly, bi-weekly cadence of regular polls, but one is a result of an initiative in the community to add IRV, ranked choice voting, to governance polls, and the idea for this is just to give a healthier kind of signal for what the executive vote should hold. So if there's a lot of contention within, like, let's say a stability fee vote, it's going to be reflected in the final number that's actually chosen. Like and also, like, if your first choice doesn't get chosen, yeah, I actually should probably read a little bit deeper into this so I could explain it better. But nevertheless, there's a forum post in here that's linked in the proposal. I highly recommend you guys read it before you vote yes or no. In general, there's probably more pros than cons, but I'll let you guys decide that for yourself. And a little typo. And then the other special governance poll is the vault compensation poll. So following March 12th's Black Thursday's events, with the whole zero bid auctions and people losing collateral that they didn't expect to lose, so there was a huge public outcry for kind of compensating the vault holders who lost unjustly. And so right now, this is going to a poll to MKR voters whether there should be some form of compensation to victims of the zero bid exploit. And at the moment, as of like an hour or two ago, there's about 56,000 MKR for yes and about 8,000 MKR for no. And fun fact, this poll was drafted and set up by the community, so that's pretty awesome. It's actually done on the forum thread, and it's linked to a GitHub that a bunch of people participated in. But nevertheless, this is kind of the first step in the whole question of compensating these people. And I'm actually gonna really quickly just read off the proposal so that I don't mix up the details. But if it's yes, the next vote is going to be whether they should be reimbursed in ETH or in DAI. And also, yeah, so let me just kind of go here. Yeah, so if this poll is decided as no, then no further effort needs to be spent on a more exact estimate of vault holder losses. If this poll is decided yes, then another on-chain poll will be held to decide whether the compensation amount to be determined will be denominated in DAI or the collateral asset that was liquidated. Yeah, there's a bit more details here. I'll leave it to you guys to read it. But the general consensus in the community, roughly from what I've been hearing, is that the idea is leaning towards yes, but there still has to be a ton of analysis done to determine the amount, because there's a lot of nuance, right? There's a lot of nuance. So yeah, leaving that to you guys to read, but this is a good first step for the Maker token holder community to decide on this like important public issue. Yeah, so moving forward, yeah, we produce a weekly summary of the Thursday risk and governance call. It's filled with all the slides, video anchors, pretty much everything you can. And I want to give like a huge special shout out to the community contributors that make this possible. So Tim Black, Igor Tesla, Juan Julian, who actually helped out on his first summary. This is the first one he helped out with this time. And so, yeah, these summaries, I actually want to speak about them just very briefly. We're hoping, obviously, to make this kind of standardized and also decentralize the production of these. The risk and governance calls contain tons of interesting insights from people, tons of interesting information. And so it's important to kind of document it instead of just having it as a call, because obviously calls are very time consuming to watch, even if you're watching them at twice speed, right? And so these are very important. And we actually very recently, oh, I don't actually have it, but we very recently also launched a governance and risk summary guide. So it outlines the format, it outlines all of the kind of formatting rules. And right now we're looking for more contributors to actually help produce these summaries. So if you're interested, reach out to me, and I'd love to get you guys on board. And obviously it's not like volunteer work. It's compensated work. We have DAI grants available for people who are interested in doing these. And the best people to do these are people who are well informed about the Maker protocol, who are able to kind of check for semantic accuracy, and in general, who probably already watch the governance calls. So if you're interested in that, hit me up. Governance at a glance. If you guys don't know already, Governance at a Glance is a community-produced thread. It's a long-running thread, and it's updated by Long for Wisdom every week. And it contains kind of like all of the current events that are going on in the forums. But I wanted to highlight two particular threads that are super interesting. So there is a community-driven governance messaging project plan. So it's a kind of messy name, but the idea is the community is coming together to discuss how does the community voice the DAO's opinion on something, or the community's opinion on something, in a cohesive way. Because right now, the Maker Foundation handles much of the communications in terms of PR. But of course, the Maker Foundation isn't meant to be doing that for the long term. Eventually, the DAO will have to have its own voice. And this is kind of step one for speccing that out and what that looks like, and it ties into this whole idea that Rune presented on Thursday of elected paid contributors and DAO teams, because we very well might see a PR or communications like domain team, and this is kind of the first steps towards that. And I know we're right at about the hour, so I'm gonna just talk about the MIPS very briefly, but then I will end the call a little bit early, and I could cover the stuff that happened this week in next week's governance call. But yeah, the second thread is a governance initiative being done by Richard Culler Lopez called the Defy Consortium on Emergency Shutdown. And this is an effort to get not just MakerDAO, Maker voters, Maker community members to better define the details around emergency shutdown, but also to get people in the greater DeFi space who would be affected by the emergency shutdown to come and be part of a working group. Nah, don't worry about it, Chris. It's totally fine. So if you are working for a DeFi project that uses DAI or intends to use DAI, or or anything, definitely hook up with Rich on this thread. It is just the beginnings of it, so I don't think there's been any meetings or any actual serious work produced, but that's the intention of it. The intention is to understand the implications of an emergency shutdown, to better define the appropriate time when emergency shutdown should actually happen, and to just outline all of the stakeholders involved, and to just get a very clear view of this big game theoretical red button that we call emergency shutdown, right? And yeah, and then the last thing that I'm going to mention, and you can definitely check out this blog post and the associated forum threads, but the Maker Foundation just laid a huge bomb down on the community in a great way. We gave the community kind of the first 13 MIPS, and if you don't know what a MIP is, it's called a Maker Improvement Proposal, and so this is an attempt to better standardize governance at MakerDAO, and so these are not ratified by governance yet. They are the first version for the community to look at that establishes this kind of this framework for governance that helps everybody be on more of the same page and to get things done hopefully more efficiently. So yeah, and everything else I guess I will actually leave for next week, because we are at about an hour and 4, and I know you guys all have stuff to do with your days. So without further ado, I'm gonna just open it up to you guys if you have any quick questions before we end the call. But otherwise, thank you guys for joining. I hope this was educational to you. I hope you definitely found value in this call. And if you have any feedback on the call, reach out to me. If you have any cool ideas for guests, reach out to me. For formats, reach out to me. Yeah. So thank you guys for joining.
Thanks, David.
No problem, Katie. All right, I'm hitting stop recording now.